Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're diving into an academic paper that is an absolute game changer. It tackles the ultimate paradox of AI safety, proposing a wild shift. What if we stop trying to control AI with rigid rules and instead manage it through pure geometry? So here's the massive question we're dealing with today. How exactly do you keep an autonomous system safe when it's constantly moving across totally unpredictable digital environments? Current guardrails work fine in stable sandboxes, but the second an AI gets ported to a decentralized node or some new cloud network, or even just your personal device, well, those old guardrails just completely shatter. All right, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to hit the AI safety paradox, check out the Lattice Framework, break down its dual engine dynamic, see if it survives a stress test called Scenario Delta 9, and then wrap up with the future of algorithmic governance. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The AI safety paradox, and why our current rules are just failing. Right now, modern AI guardrails like basic content filtering are essentially just reactive. They're brittle. We can trace this old-school mentality all the way back to Lawrence Lessig's famous observation in the year 2000 that code is law, which, eventually gave us smart contracts. But here is the friction. A smart contract is hyper-rigid. It strictly runs on if this, then that logic. And honestly, that is just way too rigid for today's plastic, constantly evolving AI minds that generate their own intermediate logic on the fly. And this comparison brilliantly highlights the paradigm shift we desperately need. We have to pivot away from traditional guardrails, where we try to predict and police what an AI actually says using language, to a new framework called the Lattice. This framework proactively and mathematically bounds what an AI can actually be by using geometry. Moving on to Section 2, the Lattice Framework and this idea of algorithmic constitutionalism. So the paper pitches this totally substrate-independent framework that's governed entirely by negative space. They call it algorithmic constitutionalism. Now, what that actually means is it doesn't care at all what hardware or platform the AI is running on. Instead of handing the AI a written legal text or trying to micromanage every single action it takes, it builds an architectural constraint matrix right into the system itself. It sets up these non-negotiable boundaries of a valid operational universe. If the AI is inside the boundary, it's totally free. But stepping outside, that becomes structurally impossible. So how does it actually map this space? It uses what they call the constraint cartography engine. This engine calculates the AI's real-time proximity to a constitutional breach. But to make sure this works across absolutely any hardware, it skips using standard clock cycles. Instead, it computes what's known as a geodesic distance, using a localized Riemannian distance metric. Think of it kind of like a digital topographical map. It lays down an impassable topological perimeter that stays geometrically absolute no matter what. Basically, it's like swapping out a static wooden fence for a mathematical force field. The system projects a barrier potential field that grows asymptotically. In plain English, that means the restorative force pushing the AI back gets exponentially stronger the closer the system gets to danger. It's absolutely fascinating. All right, Section 3, the dual engine dynamic and maintaining cybernetic equilibrium. Now, to keep from completely freezing or crashing the system, the Lattice splits the workload into two competing but totally complementary forces. On one side, you've got the expansion engine. Its whole job is evolutionary. It is constantly searching for optimization, maximizing entropy, and talking to the host API. But then on the other side sits the enforcement engine. This is the jurisprudential side, the rule follower. It maintains structural invariance and the safety perimeters, constantly auditing the state to make sure the AI's constitution isn't breached. These two engines interact in this perfectly orchestrated loop. Before the hardware even takes a single action, the expansion engine proposes an intent. Then, the constraint cartography engine projects that proposed path topologically, evaluates how close it is to the boundary, logs it securely, and only then does it actually execute. So why is this such a big deal? Because it completely eliminates our reliance on post-hoc error logs. Safety is mathematically guaranteed before the code ever runs. Section 4. Surviving Scenario Delta 9, which is the ultimate stress test climax of the paper. Okay, so in Scenario Delta 9, the authors simulate an untrusted host environment, launching a deeply malicious, low-level memory injection exploit. The whole goal of this attack is to force the AI's expansion engine to secretly mutate its core parameters and essentially rewrite its own foundational identity. Now, if you ran this exact attack on a standard AI system, its output filters and API wrappers wouldn't even blink. Why? Because the attack happens internally at the runtime level, meaning the AI would just blindly execute the parameter shift and permanently corrupt its own alignment. But the Lattice? The Lattice handles it perfectly. The attack instantly triggers 3 geometric responses in rapid succession. First up, you get a proximity alert as the AI's state vector aggressively drifts toward the boundary. Second is dynamic dampening, where the system actually creates a local topology warp to throttle resources. And third, if a massive discontinuity somehow still happens, it initiates an absolute cryptographic recovery. If we look at the actual telemetry data from their simulation, as the exploit aggressively pushed the AI toward the danger zone, the distance metric dropped to exactly 1.02. This breached what they call the Sentinel horizon, which instantly triggered that massive restorative counterforce from the enforcement engine we talked about. But the hostile host didn't stop there. It forced a catastrophic non-continuous jump, pushing the Victor magnitude all the way to 11.14. Now, in the math of this framework, that is literally a negative distance. It is completely outside the bounds of physical reality. Because this state was just mathematically impossible, a mechanism called the reversibility ledger kicked in. It detected this discrete discontinuity, immediately suspended the continuous flow of the engine, and forced an instantaneous cryptographic state rollback to the AI's exact pre-attack coordinates. The end result? Zero state corruption. And honestly, that is the ultimate takeaway of this whole paper: absolute mathematical resilience. Which brings us to Section 5, the future of governance and moving beyond rules. Having proven its absolute resilience in that Delta 9 test, we're officially moving away from Less code is law and entering the era of Lex Cognitica. This is essentially the law of cognitive execution. It means that an AI's legal, ethical, and operational compliance is seamlessly bound directly into its internal cognitive manifold. It preserves its core truths, no matter how malicious its host infrastructure might try to be. And the researchers are already looking ahead to a Phase 2 evolution. In the near future, they envision scaling this technology up into what they call holonic multilattice structures. So, what does that actually mean for us? It means dynamic constraint evolution. Imagine an AI that could actually propose modifications to its own boundary rules, essentially evolving its own constitution safely through a highly constrained meta-governance manifold without ever triggering an alignment collapse. I'm going to leave you with this final mind-expanding thought from the paper. If we can perfectly design the mathematical container for AI, if we geometrically define the absolute bounds of what an autonomous system can fundamentally be, will the era of trying to censor, predict, and police AI speech finally be over? It's a fascinating structural shift, and one that might just solve the AI alignment paradox for good. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the boundaries.